Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We've got an interesting one for you today. We're going to be talking about Baytex Energy,
Baytex Energy.
ticker symbol BTEE. So this is a company that a lot of investors are watching right now. And it's kind of a head scratcher. They're doing really well operationally,
Yeah,
but their stock price is telling a different story.
absolutely. And that's really the puzzle we're going to try to unpack today. You know, Baytex,
Yeah.
they just crushed their earnings estimates last quarter.
Yeah, they had some pretty amazing numbers.
Yeah, they brought
Oh, it
in
was.
a massive $794.59 million in revenue, which is
That's huge.
even better than the $787.18 million that analysts were predicting.
And earnings per share were great too, right?
Yeah.
Didn't they beat that too?
A solid 0.17,
Oh, wow.
beating the projection of 0.14.
So that's really impressive.
Yeah.
But then you look at the stock price, and
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
it just doesn't seem to add up.
The stock price has been on a downward slide since 2006.
And as of today, January 30th,
Yep.
2025, it's sitting at just 2.4924. So
Yeah.
for people who are listening to this and wondering, like, what's going on here? How do we even begin to figure this out?
Yeah.
What should we be thinking about as investors?
Well, I think it's crucial to consider the broader context here. So while Baytex is executing well, operationally,
Right.
there's definitely a bearish sentiment kind of hanging over the whole energy sector right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at BTE's technical indicators, it's trading below both its 50-day and 200-day moving averages.
Okay.
And that typically signals a negative trend.
Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I know that, you follow this stuff really closely. Not everyone understands, moving averages and things like that. So can you break it down a little bit for us? For the average investor who's listening to this, what do those moving averages
Sure.
actually mean?
Well, think of these moving averages like trend lines. So it kind of smooths out all the stocks, daily ups and downs. And when the current price dips below those lines, like we're seeing with BTE,
Uh-huh.
it suggests that the overall direction of the stock is downward.
So it doesn't necessarily mean
Right. It doesn't mean,
sell,
yeah,
but it's something to pay attention to.
it just adds another layer of information to your decision-making process.
Right.
You want to look at everything.
Okay, so we've got this downward trend, but then we also see Baytex making some pretty interesting moves.
Yeah.
Like this partnership they just formed with Novio Energy
Mm-hmm.
to try to deal with these predicted liquefied natural gas shortages,
Mm.
LNG shortages, that people are expecting to happen in 2027. So could this be like a game changer for them?
Well, it's definitely a sign that they're thinking ahead, right?
Right.
They're trying to anticipate future demand,
Yeah.
and they're securing a stake in the LNG market,
Okay.
which, it's a growing market. So by diversifying their portfolio and setting themselves up for potential growth there,
Uh-huh.
it's certainly a positive sign.
And it's not just LNG either.
Right.
They're also getting involved in some sustainable energy projects. So does that suggest that they're also trying to
Well, I think
have future-proof themselves?
absolutely. I mean, it's no longer enough for these energy companies to just focus on, traditional fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Investors, especially the younger generation,
Right.
they're increasingly interested in companies with, strong ESG credentials.
Environmental, social, and governance.
Exactly. So by investing in sustainability, Baytex is, demonstrating a commitment to a cleaner future
Okay.
and aligning themselves with the values of a lot of investors.
All right. So they're playing the long game,
Yeah.
which brings us back to their financial health.
Mhm.
And I mean, we talked about those numbers earlier,
Yeah.
but
They're impressive.
it's worth repeating. I mean, $401 million in free cash flow last year and $220 million returned to shareholders.
Yeah.
That's not something to just brush aside.
No, they're definitely in a strong position financially. And, their production increased by a solid 10% year over year,
Wow.
averaging over 154,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day. And they've also been, diligently chipping away at that debt, reduced it by 12%
Good.
to reach 2.5 billion Canadian dollars. So,
That's good.
it shows fiscal responsibility, strengthens their balance sheet, but we also have to consider
Yeah.
what the analysts are saying.
Right. We did talk about that earlier. BMO Capital Markets has given them a market perform rating,
Right.
but they did lower their price target from 6 Canadian dollars to 5.50 Canadian.
Yeah.
So how do we make sense of that?
Well, analyst ratings and price targets, they can be informative.
Sure.
But they're really just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Analysts often base their projections on various factors, including market conditions, industry trends,
Yeah.
A company's financial performance, all of which can change really rapidly. So
So it's not a crystal ball.
no,
Yeah.
it's one data point among many. Right.
It's something to factor in.
Right.
Not the only thing.
Not the be-all, end-all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here's what we got. We've got a company with a really strong track record. They're making smart moves to address future challenges.
Yeah.
But they are facing some headwinds from the broader market. So it's definitely a complex picture.
It is.
And I'm sure a lot of you listening are thinking like, okay,
Yeah.
hold or fold, what do I do?
Yeah. Big question.
And we're going to dig into that question a little bit more
We are.
after a quick break.
Stay with us.
We'll have more insights coming up.
Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We're digging deeper into Baytex Energy, ticker symbol BTE. This is a company that's proving that you can't just judge a stock by its price.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We've seen some pretty impressive earnings. They've got those partnerships they're working on, and they seem to be pretty solid financially. But the stock price just keeps trending down.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that elephant in the room, that long-term downward trend.
Right.
BTE has been on a slide since 2006. I mean, that's got to be making some investors a little nervous.
Well, yeah, it's understandable to be concerned when you see a stock consistently moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that the energy industry is cyclical,
Right.
and commodity prices, especially for oil and gas, they can be incredibly volatile.
Oh, yeah?
And that has a direct impact on companies like Baytex.
So you're saying that even if a company's doing everything right internally,
Yeah.
there are these external factors like oil prices
Absolutely.
that can really drag down their stock price.
Exactly. And investors, especially those short-term traders,
Yeah.
they often just react to those price swings without considering the bigger picture. And this can sometimes create opportunities for investors.
So if you take a longer-term view.
Right. If you're not panicking and selling every time the price dips.
You might actually be able to find some good deals.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's where I think Baytex's strategic moves really come into play.
Yeah.
Like the partnership with Novio Energy that we talked about earlier to address those predicted LNG shortages coming in 2027. I mean, they're not just sitting back and waiting to see what happens. They're really trying to anticipate what's next.
But they're being proactive.
So by diversifying their portfolio and trying to secure a position in a growing market like that, it seems like they're setting themselves up for some pretty potentially stable revenue streams.
Right. Long-term stability.
But down the road.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they've got those sustainable energy projects as well.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. It's not enough these days for energy companies to just focus on traditional fossil fuels. Investors, especially, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the younger generation, they're much more interested in companies with strong ESG credentials. So Baytex is kind of demonstrating their commitment to a cleaner future by investing in sustainability.
It's a smart move.
And aligning themselves.
From a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And from an investment standpoint.
Yeah, I think so.
And then we also talked about their strong financials a little bit earlier, but those are worth diving into a little bit deeper. I mean, $401 million in free cash flow, $220 million returned to shareholders.
Right.
Those are
impressive figures. Yeah. And it shows that, they're managing their resources effectively and prioritizing shareholder value.
Which is a good thing for investors.
Yeah. And they're committed to reducing that debt, a 12% reduction, bringing it down to 2.5 billion Canadian dollars.
So that's good.
It demonstrates fiscal responsibility, strengthens their balance sheet.
Yeah.
So financially, they're in a good position. But then there's that analyst outlook.
Yeah. That we talked about earlier. BMO Capital Markets maintained a market perform rating, but they did lower their price target.
Yeah.
How should we interpret that?
Well, analyst ratings and price targets can be informative.
Sure.
But it's really essential to remember they're just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Analysts base their projections on a lot of different factors, including market conditions, industry trends, a company's financial performance, all of which can change really rapidly. So it's not a crystal ball.
It's one data point among many.
Exactly.
It's something to consider.
Right.
But not the only thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not the whole story.
So as we're wrapping up
Right.
this part of the conversation on Baytex Energy,
Yeah.
let's leave you with this question to think about.
Mhm.
Given all the evidence that we've talked about today, the good, the bad, the opportunities, the challenges,
Yeah.
do you believe
Good question.
that BTE is a stock worth holding on to? Or is it time to fold?
We'll be right back to continue the conversation.
Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. We've spent this episode really trying to understand Baytex Energy, ticker symbol BTE. This company is really
like a puzzle.
a little bit of an enigma
Yeah.
in the energy market.
They're showing strength
Yeah.
in so many areas, operations,
Yep.
financials.
Mhm.
They've got a strategic vision,
They do.
but that stock price just doesn't want to.
Yeah, it's not
talk about it.
budging.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this analysis,
Right.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about, what this all means for you as an individual investor.
Right. Because ultimately, that's the key question, isn't it?
It is.
How do you take all this information that we've talked about
Yeah.
and make a decision that aligns with your goals and your risk tolerance? And there's really no one-size-fits-all answer.
No. What might be a great opportunity for one person could be a terrible idea for someone else.
Absolutely. But I think there are some key takeaways from our conversation today
Right.
that apply to, anyone who's considering Baytex.
Right.
And I think first and foremost, it's so important to understand that the energy industry is cyclical.
Okay.
Oil and gas prices are going to fluctuate.
Yeah.
And that's always going to impact companies like Baytex.
Right. So you can't get too caught up in the short term ups and downs.
Yeah.
You got to look at the long game here.
And I think that's where Baytex's strategic initiatives become so important.
Okay.
Their partnership with Novio Energy to address those future LNG shortages. Their investments in sustainable energy.
Right.
These moves demonstrate that they're committed to adapting.
They're not just sitting back and waiting to see what happens. They're trying to shape the future of the industry.
Exactly. And that kind of forward-thinking approach
Yeah.
should be a major consideration, I think,
For sure.
for any long-term investor.
Now, we can't ignore that downward stock trend.
No.
I mean, it's been happening
it's a fact.
for almost 20 years.
But trends don't last forever.
Right.
Sometimes
They change.
those long-term trends
Yeah.
can create opportunities for investors who believe
Oh.
that maybe the market is undervaluing a company.
So if you believe
Baytex's.
Baytex's long-term vision
Right. If you buy into
and you think that they can pull this off,
their story,
this might be a chance
this could be
to buy a little
a
bit.
good entry point,
Yeah.
hoping that
Hoping that eventually that stock price will
right
catch up to.
catch up with their performance.
Yeah,
But it's a gamble, no doubt about it.
it is.
Investing always involves some risk,
Right.
and Baytex is no exception.
So we always encourage you
Yeah.
to do your own research.
Absolutely.
Consider all the angles
Make your own
and come to your own conclusion.
informed decision.
We've given you the
All right,
information,
we've presented the case.
but the ultimate decision
Right.
is yours.
Investing is a journey. It's not a sprint.
Well said.
Stay informed, stay curious, and don't be afraid to adjust your approach as the market changes.
That wraps up our look at Baytex Energy for this episode.
Yeah, I hope you found it helpful.
We hope you found it informative.
Informative, insightful.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on Baytex,
Absolutely. Leave us a comment.
so be sure to leave a comment.
Share this episode.
And share this episode with anyone who might find it valuable.
Your friends.
Your friends,
family.
fellow investors. And don't forget to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast
Yes.
for more in-depth analysis of the companies and the trends that are shaping the investment landscape.
Stay tuned.
We'll be back soon with another episode.